So we've been talking about the spine and the thorax and the challenges that your body has to support a spinal column. The spinal column that needs to be rigid so I can carry stuff around, and also needs to be flexible so I can move stuff around, and this thing that essentially carries the working organs of my body around to places, right? It's really part of my axial skeletal system, and it's all carrying kind of my brain and all this stuff around, and my organs that make me function, except for the appendix, nobody needs that, and everything else around. And my arms and legs are the things that my legs move me around, and my arms pick up stuff when I get there. So one of the real challenges is keeping the spinal column, which is really just a stack of dominoes on top of each other, to give it the strength it really has. It's quite amazing that this stack of dominoes can bend over and pick stuff up and not just kind of fall apart. And so we looked at some really big muscles that help you with extension of the spine, right? We looked at 3 big erector spinae muscles, right, that help with extension of the spine. Miss Rader, what are the 3 erector spinae muscles?
They are the spinalis, the longissimus, and the iliocostalis.
That's awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Which one is most medial?
The spinalis.
Yeah, which one tends to like to attach to spinous processes? Don't overthink it.
The spinalis?
Yes. Sorry, this is the way I ask questions. So yes, the spinalis, okay, which is why we call it the spinalis, and which is why it's most medial. Tends to like to grab onto spinous processes. Yeah. Which one goes all the way up to my head and inserts into the mastoid process?
The longissimus.
Yes! It likes to grab on more to the transverse processes, and it goes all the way up to there, and it really attaches my head to my butt. And then which one is most lateral?
The iliocostalis.
The iliocostalis, and essentially attaches my hips to my ribs. Yeah. Beautifully done. Thank you, Ms. Rader. So we looked at those, and those are the big, powerful movers of your vertebrae. But they don't really help hold your vertebrae together. They help move your entire spinal column. And we're going to look at muscles today that sew your vertebra together. We're going to look at the shoelaces of the back. We're going to look at some really tiny muscles that like to get in between the spinous processes and in between the transverse processes to give your back more structure and to actually tie together the individual vertebrae. And these are equally, if not more important, than the spinal erectors, or the erector spinae group, because these muscles run terribly close to nerves, and so when they get tired, they can put pressure on nerves and all sorts of stuff. And this is one of the reasons we like to get down in the lamina groove, is to kind of affect these muscles too. So, let me share a little slide presentation, and we will take a look at this good stuff. Okay, here we go. Spine and thorax. So you guys talked about layers last time. There was a lot of questions about layers, and I try to be a responsive teacher. I love having such a responsive class. So I put in some stuff here about the layers of the back. And it depends on how you kind of cut it up, okay? It depends on what area you're in. In the neck, there tends to be even more layers because there's a lot going on in the neck. But if you kind of think about it, your first layer is your trapezius and your deltoids, right? If you rip those off, underneath them, you can see the rhomboids and these serratus muscles, which we have not learned about. These are not serratus anterior. These are serratus posteriors. If you go below those, because the scapulas have to move over the back muscles, you've got the erector spinae muscles, the spinalis longissimus and iliocostalis. If you go below those, you get these muscles called the transversospinalis group. And this is the multifidi, the rotatories, and the semispinalis capitis. You also get some inner rib muscles that are called the internal and external intercostals. These are actually muscles between your ribs. If you go even deeper than that, and by the way, we're going to be talking today about 4 and 5. We're going to be talking about these muscles down here. So I will show you examples, I promise. You get to these muscles called the interprocesses muscles. I think that that's in quotes because I think that's a Tapscott term. But these are muscles that are actually found between the processes. So between the spinous processes, there are muscles tying one spinous process to the other. Between the transverse processes, there's muscles tying this transverse process to the transverse process below it, and the transverse process above it. Yeah? Yeah. Miss Creel, please.
I thought it was the transverse spinalis that I thought was the shoelaces of the spine, or is it the interprocesses muscles that are the shoelaces of the spine?
The multifidi and the rotatories are the shoelaces of the spine.
Yes, I remembered it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
By the way, most people don't even talk about 5 because they're so darn deep that it's really hard to really feel them. You can't affect them, but they're very deep. Yes. Mr. Singletary, please.
How many layers of muscles do we have?
Well, by this division, about 5 in the back area.
Okay.
There's no answer to that for the whole body. It just depends on what area you're in. You know, like in my anterior brachial region, I've just got 2 layers. I got the biceps brachii, brachialis underneath it, and then we hit bone. In the posterior brachial region, I've got 1 layer of muscle. I've got the triceps, and that's it. Boom, done. So in the back, roughly 5 layers, although in the neck, you could argue that you might even have 6 because you get that even deeper. There's just a lot going on in the neck. And we are going to look at the neck in some ways separately, the neck and head.
Okay.
So it is included in part of this because it's part of the spine, but we also tie the head into it. You know, we have to chop the body up in some funny ways. But roughly 5 layers back here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I just did this to kind of give you kind of an outline of kind of how to think about stuff. So if you're in the area of the trapezius, by the way, you could push down through somebody's trapezius. We all know you'd hit their rhomboids. And then we all know you'd hit their spinalis and longissimus. And then if you went deeper, you'd hit their multifidi and rotatories. And if you went really deep, you might get into their intertransverse. Sorry. I know those words don't mean anything yet. Don't worry, we're heading there. Okay. So, this is some of the muscles we're going to talk about today. The transversospinalis muscles, the multifidi, rotatories, semispinalis capitis, and some intercostals, your inner and external costals. So, by the way, the semispinalis capitis is not shown in this picture. But what I want you to do is look down here. Let's see. You can't see my cursor. Hold on. I want cursor, come back. Sorry. There. I want you to look down in here. This gives you an idea of all the layers we have. You've got the rotatories and the multifidi deep down in your lamina groove. The semispinalis capitis up in your neck is above that. Then the spinalis and the longissimus is kind of above all that. So we've got a lot of layers right here, just going down through here in the lamina groove alone. And the lamina groove is this area in there, right in here. So let's talk about these. The multifidi and rotatories look like these shoelaces of the back. We're going to look at these separately, don't worry. I'm just trying to give you an idea where we're headed. The multifidi and rotatories are the shoelaces of the back. The semispinalis capitis is not shown in this picture, but it's up here. Remember, it's got the word capitis in it, so it's going to hook your head to your head. Capitis meaning head. And this stuff in between the ribs are called your intercostals. Remember, inter means between. So this is the muscle between your ribs, intercostals. And you actually have internal and external intercostals, just like you have internal and external obliques. So let's talk about that. Let's go a little bit deeper. Bum, bum, bum. Okay. This is a picture, by the way, of your semi-spinalis capitis. It is a muscle that runs up just part of your spine, semi-spine, to your head, semi-spinalis capitis. It is over the multifidi and rotatories. Semi-spinalis capitis. Semi-spinalis capitis, by the way, is called the speed bumps of your neck. You know when you look at the back of somebody's neck and you see two ropes running down here? It's the semi-spinalis capitis you're seeing pushing through their trapezius. By the way, the trapezius is over all this stuff, right? So we've removed the trapezius from this picture altogether. It's just not there. Okay. So we're going to talk right now about this transversospinalis group. By the way, I don't know that I've ever heard massage therapists call this the transversospinalis group. We just talk about the multifidi, rotatories, and semispinalis capitis. So it's different than the quads. Everybody knows the quads mean your thigh muscles, and we use the word quads all the time. I don't hear massage therapists on the street talking about the transversospinalis group, probably because it's so darn hard to say. But they do talk about the multifidi, rotatories, semispinalis capitis, the muscles that make it up. They talk about the muscles that make it up. Okay, I'm going to go over these in even more detail than this, but here's more overview. The multifidi are shown here on the left. Remember, they're on both sides. And the rotatories are shown here on the right. Remember, they're on both sides. They're just showing you them. Does anybody see an obvious difference between the multifidi and the rotatories here? Please raise your hand if you do. Ms. Carrillo, please.
So with the multifidi, it seems they're all going in an angle like this.
Yep.
And then with the rotators, it's smaller going in this angle, but also they have a second latch. My finger is like the second latch under it.
Yes.
And what left side looks like stitches, the right side looks more like the shoelace that you would recognize usually.
I love that. Thank you, Ms. Carrillo. Ms. Everson, do you notice anything additionally?
Similarly, but the rotatories look like they have two attachment points, while the multidipini has one.
Yep. Good. Ms. Abelos, anything else? That's all true, by the way, so far, everybody. Everything you've said.
I think that with the multifidi being larger, that they are on top of the rotatories.
Yes.
Is
That is true. Yes. Very true. Excellent. Ms. Carrillo?
I just noticed at the bottom of the multifidi, it attaches to the iliac, the iliac crest, the sacrum, and the lumbar area.
Yes.
So at the bottom, there's that big piece of meat.
It covers the sacrum. Yeah. Very well said. Okay, you guys have hit everything. So let me tell you really quickly. Ms. Carrillo talked about angles, and she's right, but the angles look different because of the length. So multifidi are longer than rotatories. Rotatories are shorter, and many of you said this too. And because the multifidi are longer, they reach down to a much further down, and so their angle changes because they're reaching further down, where the rotatories aren't reaching as far down. And the multifidi cover the sacrum. That is true. And so they have a lot to do with this kind of sacral fascia in here. All of them, the multifidi and rotatories, attach spinous processes to transverse processes. Spinous processes to transverse processes. Always. That's what they do. But those are the major differences. Multifidi are longer. Rotatories are shorter. Multifidi covers the sacrum. Yes, Ms. Everson, please.
So is the origin of the spinous process of both of those then?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't know which way the book puts it, but the origin would be the spinous processes and the insertion would be the transverse processes or vice versa, yes. Yeah. Mr. Singletary.
And the multifidi is on top of the rotaries?
Yeah. But it doesn't matter. You're going to feel them as the same muscle when you're working on them.
Okay.
Yep. They'll feel, I can't separate them when I'm working on somebody. I just feel this meat kind of in the lamina groove here. Miss Carrillo?
So it's spinous processes attached to transverse processes, the rotators.
Rotatories and multifidi.
Rotatories. And multiplicity. Okay.
Yeah, and not their own, by the way, everybody. Think about it. I know this sounds obvious, but just think about it. If I am a vertebrae, I would not need to attach my spinous process to my transverse process. They're already attached by bone. This attaches a spinous process, let's say, of C7 to the transverse process of T1. And then the spinous process of T1 to the transverse process of T2. Right? Or T3, T4, T5. Sometimes they reach much further down. But my point is, these are shoelacing, sewing your vertebra together. And then we got the semispinalis capitis over here, which hooks onto transverse processes of your upper thoracic vertebrae and your cervical vertebrae and hooks to the back of your head. So let's look at these individually now. Oh, Mr. Singletary, please. Sir? You're still muted, sir.
Sorry, I'm talking. The serratus anterior, is that on top of this semispinalis capitis, or vice versa? I'm just looking at the picture of it, and it looks like it's in the same place.
Not even, no.
No?
No. Did you say serratus anterior?
Am I getting the right muscle?
I don't think so, sir.
No, I'm sorry. I'm saying the wrong muscle. Oh, Jesus. I can call it muscle. And it goes around the same area. Oh, my God.
Miss Carrillo, do you know what muscle he's talking about? Is that why you raised your hand?
Well, if he's talking about the serratus, I'm wondering if he's meaning the posterior serratus.
I was kind of wondering that, too.
Yes.
The posteriors are in that area, and they are, I got to think about this for a second, they are over the top of these.
They're on the top of, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Serratus posteriors, which we haven't learned about yet.
Okay. As I was looking at the picture, and it looks like it was in the same place. I thought, I wonder if one is on top of the other one.
Yep. They are on top. The serratus posterior superior is on top. Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Correa.
Okay. So let's talk about the multifidi and rotatories. So bilaterally, if all these guys pull, they end up helping me bend backwards. So they end up bilaterally working just exactly like your spinal erectors do. So when you're lifting something really heavy, your spinal erectors kick in, but so do these little guys. They kick in to try to hold all your vertebrae together. And if they work unilaterally, because they're going diagonally, you should be able to see that things that go diagonally tend to like to rotate you. That's true of your abdominals. When we learn about your external obliques, they are diagonal. They help you rotate. These guys can help you rotate too when they work unilaterally. They'll pull you. They actually kind of grab the spinous process and they'll rotate you to the opposite side. So they can help you extend your vertebral column and rotate your vertebral column, which are two really important things to be able to do. So the book is a little bit confusing about origin and insertion here. And Miss Everson, the book has it the opposite the way I told you. So the book calls the origin the transverse process, which makes sense actually. So here's the difference between multifidi and rotatories specifically. Yeah, Miss Everson, please.
Wait, why does that make sense in your head?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for asking. Because what happens is that this muscle is on, if you can see me right now, if I'm a vertebrae, right, these are my little transverse processes. If I'm a muscle holding onto a transverse process and I grab a spinous process up here and I pull on it, it's going to cause that person to rotate. So that's why it made sense to me. It's grabbing onto that. By the way, it doesn't really matter. You rotate either way, but that's why. Did that at all answer your question?
It did, yeah.
Okay. So think about this in terms of attachments. Remember how I talk about attachments, that origins are attachments and insertions are attachments, and it doesn't really matter because when I'm rotating the spinous process of this vertebrae is going to get closer to the transverse process here. So it doesn't matter which comes to which, right? And there are situations where the transverse process could come to the spinous process, right? But here's the attachments. Rotatories are shorter, and so they like to attach to either the vertebrae right above or below them, or one two down. So let me give you an example. If you are rotatories and you are hooked to the spinous process of T1, you're going to be hooked to the transverse process of probably T2 and T3. Hold on one second, everybody. Hey, do you want me to close this door? Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't like billowing. Good, okay. There's another teacher, and I want to make sure I wasn't like disturbing her because I'm yelling at you. So anyway, rotatories are short, and so they only go down one vertebrae or two vertebrae. So a rotatory is attached to the spinous process of T1 will skip down to T2 and or T3. That's as far down as it goes. A multifidi will attach to the spinous process of T1 and go down. This is so cute. Oh, I got treats. Thank you. No, I'm good. I got coffee. Coffee and chocolate. So the multifidi will actually attach to the spinous process of T1 and go down to T3 or T4 or T5. So it likes to go down 2 or 4 vertebrae because it's longer, and the rotatories only like to go down 1 or 2 vertebrae. Beyond that, you don't need to understand that more than that. And I'm not dumbing it down for you. What I meant was nobody understands more than that. The fact is they shoelace it in the back, and Mother Nature is like, we're putting these shoelaces everywhere. So first what it does is it comes in there with the really deep down, it comes in there with the rotatories, and it ties T1 to T2 and T3. Ties T2 to T3 and T4. Ties T3 to T4 and T5. Really tight little shoelaces, short little tiny shoelaces, right? Then it says that's not enough. It comes in there with a multifidi and puts it on top of that and ties T1 to T3 and T4. T2 to oh gosh, gotta keep up with this. T5 and T6. Much longer shoelaces. That's all. So honestly, it'd be like if you guys took your shoes and you laced up every hole, that'd be your rotatories. But then you were like, no, I really want these shoes on tighter. You took another set of shoelaces and went through like every second or third or fourth hole and laced over the top of that. That's your multifidi. And together, when things are diagonal together, and they both try to turn you, they can't, so they end up extending you. But when they work unilaterally, they pull you to the opposite side. So the guys on the right side pull, and you turn left. Because there's a spinous process sticking out back there. And if you pull on a spinous process back here, my thumb goes to the right, my body goes to the left. And that's what's happening with the rotatories and multifidi. I love these muscles. I love them so much. I love everything about them. They're cute, they're adorable, they're powerful, they've got great strength in numbers, and most therapists don't know to get in the lamina groove and work them, and when you do on clients, you get this huge relief. It's just so important to work. I love, love, love them. They should not be ignored. Ms. Carrillo, please.
Yeah, I actually had a friend I worked on, and I was worried because she was a bit heavier, and I was like, I hope I can get in. But I warmed her up properly, and I was actually able to fit into her spine, and I did it. I did it with the fingers, I did it with the knuckles, and she just felt such relief afterwards. So I truly believe that.
Yeah.
She felt like she could breathe easier and everything.
I love that. And Miss Carrillo's, what I also love about what Miss Carrillo did is she's thinking in layers, right? She didn't try to get into the multifidi right away. First, we loosen up. That's what I use my elbows and forearms and fists for and everything. Loosen up the spinalis and longissimus. Loosen them up and get them out of your way. They're still in your way, but they're soft now. Get them soft and then wiggle them out of the way and go down into the lamina groove with your fingers. The second thing I will say that's really neat too is remember if you ever have a challenging client, like Miss Carrillo said, she's a little heavy. I wasn't sure I was going to get my fingers down in there, right? We're not judging her. We're just saying it's a challenge. My ex-wife told me this, and it was actually really helpful. She said, remember whenever you have a challenging client, that every single therapist before you has had that same challenge with that client, and you don't need to succeed, you just need to do better than they did. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but get in there and try to do it, whereas a lot of therapists are like, oh, it's just not going to work, I'm not even going to try. No, go in there. Even if you only have 10% success, it could be 10% more than everybody who got 0 success. So yeah, very, very cool. Yep, so we're going down in layers. We've kind of loosened up the erector spinae muscles, and now we're down into the multifidi and rotatories, which is kind of by the nerve plexus that come out there, and these really deep muscles. And by the way, they're exhausted deep muscles, right? They're tiny, and they work very hard. And they have a lot to do with, by the way, your structural, what I want to say, your postural state. Meaning they're often tight all the time, just to kind of keep me standing here in front of you. That's part of their job, is just to kind of keep everything there. So, super duper important. That's the multifidi and rotatories. I can only think of 2 differences about them. They all connect spinous processes to transverse processes, right? But rotatories only skip down 1 to 2 vertebrae. Multifidi tend to skip down 2 to 4 vertebrae. And multifidi, because they're longer, they cover the sacrum. And this is yet another good reason to scrape up on the sacrum. It's another good reason to scrape up on the sacrum, to work the meat off the sacrum. And I think you all know what I mean now. Like, that's when you kind of know you've got a good massage going, is, you know when you have those aches that feel like they're in your bones? They feel like they're in your bones. They're probably not, right? But you feel like somebody actually kind of get into that stuff that's like achy in the bone. That's when you scrape meat off the bone. And so definitely work them down into the sacrum. Absolutely.
It's serratus anterior, but it's nowhere near that area. I was thinking the levator scapula.
The levator scapula is superficial to these muscles.
Okay.
And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense that it's superficial because these muscles move the spine. The levator scapula is kind of hooked to the outside of the spine, and it's more superficial. Levator scapula is essentially right underneath the trapezius.
Okay, gotcha.
And it would be, even if it was at the same, maybe you could even argue it's the same level as these muscles, but it doesn't matter because the levator scapula is coming off the transverse processes out here, right, down to the scapula. So it would be just on this outside here. It's like a little mini trapezius here, kind of like here.
Okay, so one is more medial to the other.
Oh, yes. Definitely the levator scapula is more lateral than the multifidi and the rotatories. Absolutely 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Carrillo.
Sorry, Mr. Singletary, I always got your back. But I just realized if you're going to be gone like the 4th Monday every month, how will the lecture go? Who is someone else, like Mr. Ibarra or Miss Barrow, going to teach lecture online?
Yeah. I will probably actually rotate back and forth between them so they get practice. And so you'll probably have one month and one the next month, assuming they're not on vacation, all sorts of assumptions. But you will have a lecturer, and it will be most likely Mr. Ibarra or Miss Bauer rotating back and forth. If they weren't available, we'd probably call in Miss Borish or, but it would be somebody you were familiar with, yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And it doesn't affect you, even though it's once a month. I don't even think it affects you every month because sometimes we have like clinic going on where it doesn't matter because I'm gone and you're gone or you're in clinic or whatever. But yes, that's exactly right. Ms. Abelos.
So as we're going through these muscles, the transversospinalis group, it makes me think of cranial sacral therapy.
Yeah.
And and I know that it's really super light touch, but it's affecting muscle through the nervous system. So are these the targeted muscles during that therapy, or is it just the entire 5 layers?
I've never taken a craniosacral class. Miss Waite has. And so I don't fully know, but I know that craniosacral, by the way, I don't know that I fully believe in craniosacral, which doesn't mean you shouldn't believe in it, by the way.
I don't.
Okay, good. Okay, so here's my problem with craniosacral. It's not a big problem. I think it feels amazing because, yes, I think you end up working on these muscles, Ms. Abelos, and I think you end up working on the suboccipitals and the sacrum, and I think working on the base of the head and working on the sacrum are brilliant places to work. I think it's one of those things where it works, but probably not because of the way people think it works. Does that make sense? Like you could
Like it's psychosomatic almost.
well, or like let's take reflexology.
Okay.
I don't have an opinion about reflexology. It might really work for the reasons it does. But feet massages are so good already, and they feel so good, and they make your feet function better that maybe reflexology just works because of that. Maybe it doesn't work for the reasons we think it does, right? And I think that's what I think about craniosacral. But anyway, my understanding about craniosacral work is they are trying to affect the pulse of the fluid inside your spinal cord. And there is fluid inside your spinal cord, and it has a very subtle pulse. What I can't figure out is, how do I affect it by pushing through the muscles and then through the bones? So I'm assuming they're trying to affect the fluid at the two ends of your spinal column, but you still can't get into that fluid. I just don't understand how. It makes no sense to me. And I feel like I go to these continuing ed classes sometimes and just ask them, why does such and such work? And they don't give me full answers, and then I don't want to ask more because I don't want to be the jerk in the room who's like, doesn't make sense to me. But I just, now, but by the way, when Miss Waite comes, we should ask her because I think she really enjoyed her craniosacral class. And that doesn't mean, I don't know, I'd just be curious about her thing. But these are the muscles you accidentally work on, Miss Avalos. That's all I know. Yeah. I know it's very subtle. You're right. You're barely touching like the skull and the sacrum kind of thing. Maybe you're trying to shift the fluid back and forth. I don't know. I'm with you.
It might be a more energetic approach.
That's true. I think amazing things, I think you do too. Amazing things happen if you just get the client to sit still with you as you just gently hold them, I mean, all sorts of stuff. I think massage probably works for all sorts of reasons I don't understand too, not just, increased blood flow and such. Okay, so we just talked about the multifidi and rotatories. You don't need to memorize like the origins and insertions in the book. You just need to know that both the multifidi and rotatories tie a spinous process of one vertebrae to a transverse process of another vertebrae. It's either 1 or 2 down for the rotatories, and it's probably 2 to 4 down for the multifidi. And the multifidi, because they're longer, also cover the sacrum, right? Together, they cause an extension. One side unilaterally causes rotations. Cool. Let's look at the semispinalis capitis. I'm assuming that's what's next. Yeah. Semispinalis capitis also grabs on transverse processes and hooks to the back of your head, and it just helps to extend your cervical vertebrae. This muscle is deep to the trapezius, but it is considered the speed bumps of the neck. And so the 2 bumps that you see going down a lot of people's necks, those 2 lines going down the back of their neck. Yes, that you're grabbing right now. Thank you. That is the semispinalis capitis poking through underneath the trapezius. So it's pushing the trapezius up on those 2 lines and giving you that kind of speed bump ropey thing back there. And they're back there because the trapezius helps to hold your head up too. But your head is actually a lot of work to hold up. So semispinalis capitis is one of the muscles that helps hold your neck up and helps with the neck extension. It attaches the transverse processes of like C4 halfway down your neck to T5, first part of your thoracic region, and runs up and inserts between the superior and inferior nuchal lines of the occiput. That sounds very confusing, but you can all feel your external occipital protuberance right now. It's the bump here. What's basically impossible to feel is there's like a little indentation below it that's like a little line below it. You might be able to feel that. And that's probably your superior nuchal line. You can't usually feel your inferior nuchal line because it's in too deep. And so this thing is kind of in really deep in there and inserted, but it's inserted into your occiput, into the back of your head. That's what's important. Yeah? Miss Clayton, please.
So what does it mean if you press on that indentation and it hurts?
It means, I say this about a lot of stuff, Miss Clayton, so, I mean, take it with a grain of salt. But this is one of the areas that I think is so crucial to work on almost everybody. It's just the one that gives my clients so much relief. And it's just a high tension area. You'll probably have tension below this muscle in what's called the suboccipitals that we haven't even gotten to yet. That are even deeper than this muscle. And this is where tension headaches in a way can come from. This area is just a high tension, high priority target. And like I often joke that if I could only work on like 3 things on somebody's body, I'd probably work on their feet. I'd probably work on the area you're talking about here, the suboccipital region, this little 2-finger region, and like the hips. Feet, hips, suboccipital, I'd have a pretty good massage right there. So anyway, but it's probably a sign of the fact that you've been studying in class and bent over a book and stress and all that kind of stuff. Very common.
Okay.
I used to have a client that suffered from, actually I've had many clients that suffered from headaches, and some of them would, the entire massage would be spent on their upper body, and we would spend on the back of their head here, I don't know, 30 minutes. Like just a ridiculous amount of time on head and neck, especially in that little 1-inch area you're talking about.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Be careful, by the way, everybody. Not be careful because it's dangerous, not dangerous at all. Be careful because some people are hypersensitive back there because of all the tension. But I've noticed people with tension headaches and migraines are super sensitive back there, but they want you to get in. I've even had clients push their head back into my fingers because they want it that deep. Miss Hendrickson, please.
Would you work on that supine and prone, or just supine? What's the best way to get in there?
I prefer supine for several reasons. Supine on their spine. For one thing, I don't like working on people's necks when they're face down because you tend to shove their face in the face cradle. And the face cradle is already a little bit uncomfortable. And so my philosophy about that is anything I can do with the client face up, I do with the client face up. And yes, I did say do. But so like arms, I never do arms face down because, I shouldn't say never, there are times, but it's very rare because arms really can be done very well face up. And why would I leave them face down longer just to do their arms?
Right.
And I feel the same way about neck work. The other reason I like to do it supine is because then their neck can fall down over my fingers and I can articulate their neck. And I want to move your neck and have your head roll because I'm trying to get in the nooks and crannies of your neck. And that just works better with you face up.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but that's a bias, by the way. You're not wrong if you guys work face down. Just remember, try to avoid shoving their face in the face cradle. You're keeping them face down longer, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Cool. All right, so we just talked about the transversospinalis group. These are muscles that grab, these are tiny, deep muscles that grab onto the transverse processes of your vertebrae, right? The multifidi and rotatories grab on the transverse processes and attach them to spinous processes of other vertebrae. The semispinalis capitis, the muscle that runs over part of your spine, semispinalis, and attaches to your head, capitis, semispinalis capitis, grabs onto your transverse processes, and then deep on the nuchal lines in the back of your head. Yes. And this is all deep to the trapezius. Cool. And I actually think these are really some of the course, I almost could say that about every muscle we do, but these are super important muscles. Get in there, dig down the lamina groove. All these muscles exist in the lamina groove. I want you to realize, too, so that you're not, like, knocking yourself out. When I'm working in one of these areas, I don't necessarily say, oh, that's the semispinalis capitis, oh, that's a rotatoria, oh, that's multifidi. I don't. I just say, oh, these are the muscles inside the lamina groove, and I know they're really important, and I'm going to work them. So I'm feeling for spinous processes on one side of my finger and transverse processes on the other, and I'm trying to be in this valley that's created in here. And that's what I try to work on. Miss Clayton, please.
So I struggle trying to mentally get the concept of the different layers. Like, so the trapezius is all over this stuff, and then you're saying you're working deeper. So when you work deeper, does that mean you're just pressing harder because you're going to keep getting the traps?
Yes. Miss Clayton, thank you for asking that. That's a really legitimate question. Yes, that's what we mean, right? If we were a butcher, they'd be layers, because we'd actually cut the trapezius off and then peel it back and go down to a deeper layer. But you're absolutely right. I had a student call it telegraphing once, and I started using that for a long time. We are pressing. You can't work in this area. You can't work these muscles without going through the trapezius. Can't be done. So the trapezius is always in your way, absolutely. And that's why Miss Carrillo, when she was working the multifidi and rotatories on her friend, loosened up the erector spinae muscles first. She didn't really get them out of the way. That is a term that we like to use. You, by the way, you in some ways can pull them a little bit out of the way because they're long and stringy. But in general, Miss Clayton, you're right. We're pressing down through those muscles. And by the way, this is why actions are so important. Right? If I want to work, this is just an easy example, that's why I always use it. If I want to work the brachialis, which is deep, hold on, somebody just came in, no, that's, okay. If I want to work the brachialis, which is deep to my biceps brachii, now the brachialis is weird because I can hit it from the sides because I've got access to the sides, but let's say I'm coming in from the top. I don't want my biceps brachii tight. I don't want the arm stretched out like this, because my biceps brachii is kind of tight now and it stops me from getting into the brachialis. I want my biceps brachii in a loose position so I can press through it. It smushes out and I can hit the brachialis underneath it. And we're using that same concept, Miss Clayton. We are going to try to loosen up the top layers so that when we push down through them, they smush and all that pressure goes in the lower lying muscles. But you're absolutely right. We're always hitting, for example, the trapezius, always, in those areas. We're not actually getting underneath it or moving it. You're right.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. But we are thinking in terms of deeper, right? We're thinking about kind of going down there and working it that way. Cool. All right. So that's the transversospinalis group. And this is the little lamina groove. And this is somebody, I do this. This is somebody using their fingers to try to actually get into that groove and etch around in there. And feel around in there. And poke around in there. Kind of fun. These muscles are easiest to feel in the thoracic and lumbar region. They are not easy to feel in the neck, which is your cervical region, because you got so many other darn muscles there in the neck. You've got the semispinalis capitis. We didn't learn about the splenius capitis yet. You've got the trapezius over the top, which is another added layer. Whereas down the lumbar region, you don't have that. The lumbar region, it's a little easier to feel, and the lamina groove is bigger in the lumbar region. But they can be worked on the entire back and should be. They should be. Cool. So I try to actually pretend like I'm pulling away the longissimus and spinalis so that I can get into them even deeper and kind of pull it out laterally and kind of dig into that lamina groove to get into these guys. Okay. Just see something really fast here. Yeah. Let's talk about, we just talked about the semispinalis capitis. Yeah? Throwing a lot at you on this first day back, by the way. We just talked about the semispinalis capitis. You have two other muscles. One is called your splenius capitis. It goes from your spine to your head. And one is called your splenius cervicis. It goes from your spine to your cervical region. That's where they get their names. And these muscles aren't really deeper. They're just out laterally from the semispinalis capitis. Actually, let's see if we have a picture. Bear with me one second. I want to see if we have a picture that'll give us a depth idea. Maybe not. Yeah. So in some ways, these are more superficial. If you want to look at it that way. Okay. But they're all in the neck region. And again, the problem is holding your head up. Your darn head up. So remember, this picture is only showing you the left side of the splenius capitis and the right side of the splenius cervicis. You have both. So to me, these are all neck and head muscles. Semispinalis capitis that we just learned about, splenius capitis and splenius cervicis. These are not in the transversospinalis group because they don't grab onto transverse processes. Yeah? They grab onto spinous processes, which is why they're called, splenius. They grab onto spinous processes. One goes into the head, so it's spinous processes to the head. It's splenius capitis. One goes from spinous processes to the neck, so it's called splenius cervicis. Because of their angle, they can laterally flex my neck when they're working unilaterally, right? And when they work together, they can once extend. They can also help rotate when they're working unilaterally. Because if you grab onto just one ear and start pulling it, I know it's not attached to my ear, but you get the idea. It'll rotate me. So these two, like the rotatorius and multifidi, can help with extensions and rotations. And these are more neck muscles that are back there. Splenius capitis attaches a little bit higher. Where does the splenius capitis insert? It's in the slide, but somebody tell me. Yes, Miss Carrillo?
It looks like it inserts into the back of the head.
Yes, yes. No, you're absolutely right. It does insert in the back of the head, and actually, from a structural point of view, that's a very important way to look at it. Technically, what does the book say?
Okay.
You're right, by the way, Miss Graham.
The mastoid, is that the right one?
Yes.
Mastoid process
Perfect.
and lateral portion.
Of the nucleus, yeah. Don't worry about that.
Of
But
the
the mastoid process. Ms. Carrillo, do you know any other muscles that insert into the mastoid process of the temporal bone?
I'm nervous now.
That's okay.
Okay. So restate the question, and I'm going to try.
Okay. Do you know any other muscles that share an insertion with this muscle that insert into the mastoid process of the temporal bone?
There's two muscles I want to say, but I know one of them is wrong, but I'm going to say it anyways. I was thinking longissimus because I know it goes in the back of the head, and trapezius feels too easy, so.
Yeah. Longissimus is correct. Longissimus is correct. The longissimus actually inserts into the mastoid process. So we've got the splenius capitis inserts in the mastoid process, and the longissimus inserts in the mastoid process. And Miss Rader, you had your hand raised. Do you have a third muscle? Or did you just take your hand away?
The sternocleidomastoid.
Yes. So, you did great, Miss Graham. So, this bump that you guys should be able to feel right behind your ear, and it should be kind of sore if you rub underneath it. So far, we have learned 3 muscles that attach in that one area. We have, in this one area, the sternocleidomastoid that bends my head down. We have the splenius cervicis that bends my head back and to the sides. Yep. And we have the longissimus that bends my head back. So they kind of triangulate your head and can help. I mean, those three muscles could probably do all this stuff that I'm doing with my head right now. This is what I call a high priority target. Areas where multiple muscles attach are areas that you definitely want to rub because we are in a time constraint in our massages, right? I think pinkies are wonderful, but I don't spend 10 minutes of your massage on your pinky because it's not a high priority target. You're not going to get as much relief as if I spent 10 minutes on your mastoid process where I'd be hitting 3 muscles. And we will learn a 4th muscle that attaches up there. But these are the 3 really main ones. So this is a high priority target. It can lead to headaches, all sorts of stuff. And it is attached, the mastoid process is part of your temporal bone. And your temporal bone is one of the most important skull bones you've got. So this can lead to headaches and all sorts of stuff. So you want to be rubbing this area once again. Miss Hendrickson, please.
I just had a guess that you might be talking about the omohyoid. Is that the bone you were talking about?
Omohyoid?
Yes. I can't do it. Hyoid?
Yeah, you said it right. Omohyoid.
Hyoid?
Yeah. Omohyoid is very, very weird. It is a hyoid muscle, by the way, but it's not that one. The omohyoid is very weird, though, too. And we will get to that when we get to the hyoids. You're absolutely right. But there's a suprahyoid muscle that also attaches back here, too, which means this mastoid process is essentially tied to my throat, tied to my sternum, tied to my butt, tied down to my lower spine. That's a lot of pressure around that area. It's a very important kind of triangulating spot for your body. So mastoid processes are very important to rub. And if you run your fingers across your mastoid process horizontally, you're into your suboccipitals and all that. So this whole region down here below the head is super important. Super important. Super important. Should not be missed unless a client tells you to miss it. Should not be missed. This whole area under the head, think about what attaches from here to here. We've got the splenius capitis. We have the semispinalis capitis. It's not in this picture, but it runs here. We've got the trapezius. We've got the longissimus. Underneath here is the suboccipitals we haven't even learned about yet, and the ligamentum nuchae. All that stuff runs on the base of the skull right here. So you want to be rubbing right underneath skulls all the time. All the time. And I go as deep as they'll let me. There's no danger. But a lot of people are like, no, that's too much. Miss Everson, please.
I think you just summarized it, but there's no danger by pushing too hard in that area. You're not going to harm someone as long as you go very slow.
Yeah, no danger whatsoever. I've actually had clients who have migraines push back on my fingers so hard I thought they were going to hurt my fingers. But I mean, I've really gone deep in that area. And it's less likely to even bruise them in that area. Yeah, the only danger is your tip if you go too deep. There is not a medical danger back there. It's a really safe area to work. It's super thick with fascia. And Miss Everson's right. If you go slow, I can't imagine you. I think it would be impossible with your finger strength to go too deep in that area. It is for me. And I've got pretty strong hands. So go for it.
What if someone had a slip disc in their cervical region?
It wouldn't matter anyway. Still wouldn't matter.
It was on the inside?
Yeah, it's on the inside. You wouldn't hit it. Not from the back. No way. Especially at the base of the skull. You're almost away from the discs altogether in this area. Yeah. Very safe. Very safe. Now, we're not talking about quickly rotating the neck. I'm just talking about, but you could dig in there with full finger force, assuming your client was okay with it. By the way, a lot of people cannot handle that kind of pressure in there, and that's completely understandable. That's fine. Some people, I'm just lightly rubbing it. That's what they can take. But yes, please, don't be afraid of the backs of necks if you're going slow. They are super safe, super protected. Okay. So we've just covered a lot of ground, right? I mean, we just covered the shoelaces of the back, the multifidi and rotatorias that attach transverse processes to spinous processes. We talked about the semispinalis capitis that attaches transverse processes to your cap, your head. And then we said, well, you should learn about the other 2 neck muscles too. The splenius capitis that attaches spinous processes to your head, and the splenius cervicis that attaches spinous processes to the transverse processes of C1, 2, and 3. All of this kind of ties your head and neck together to give you all the beautiful articulations you have and to hold up that 10-pound rock that's at the top of your head, right? That 10-pound rock that is your skull and your brain up here. Yeah? Cool. Sorry. Dropping stuff. Okay. No, you're fine, sir. Okay. Questions about that? Hopefully this leaves you with realizing that there's just a boatload to work on in the neck. I honestly feel like I could sit down with anybody and have them lay supine on their spine, sit at the head of the table, and just put my fingers underneath their back and neck and work on them for an hour. Just kind of from here up, front and back, everything. I could just sit there for an hour without you becoming bored. There's so much to do there. I'm not kidding. In fact, I love doing that. Love doing that. Oh my God, some of my favorite work. Very intricate, very detailed. There's loads of stuff to explore back here. And again, this all ties into neck and shoulder tension, right? Which is one of your biggest complaints that clients have. Okay. So this is just a side view to kind of help us with layers again. We can see the trapezius here. We can see the splenius capitis poking out underneath it, going to the mastoid process. We can see the sternocleidomastoid mastoid under here. Deep underneath all this is the longissimus coming up to that spot too. Underneath all this stuff is longissimus sneaking up there. Mr. Singletary, this is the levator scapula here, kind of on the side of it, sneaking up here, underneath all that.
Yes, that's the muscle I was talking about.
Yeah, very good. Cool. All right. And again, back to Ms. Clayton's point, I'm not trying to actually isolate these muscles. I recognize that I'm working often through the trapezius to get to them. It's not that I only have to rub it here. I'll rub it through the trapezius too as well. It just shows you all the layers of muscle in the neck. Okay, last muscles. I dare say you probably won't actually really feel these in the true sense of the word. But these are called the intertransversari, or the interprocessus muscles. These are muscles between your transverse processes, and we've also got some interspinalis muscles too. I'll show you in just a second. The intertransversari are literally between transverse processes in your cervical region and your lumbar region. They help you to laterally flex. They still also, by the way, your book should say this, but they help you to bilaterally extend. They also help just tie your vertebrae together. Why do you not have these extra muscles in your thoracic region? I mean, nobody really knows, but why do you think? Ms. Carrillo, please.
I would think because in the lumbar region, that's where we carry it. It supports a lot of the weight that's
Excellent.
coming down on it, so
Excellent.
it needs more reinforcement.
Okay, but why the cervical region?
I'm trying to remember from the book, but the book just said that
You're right about the lumbar, by the way.
I can't go any more detailed than that because I can't recall.
Perfect. Miss Clayton.
I think it would make breathing too difficult.
Oh, I like that answer. Yeah. Miss Hendrickson?
That's not the right answer, though.
Well, no, Miss Clayton, actually, there is no wrong answer to this because nobody knows, right? God didn't, kind of explain all the little intricacies, and we guess at why Mother Nature or God or whatever put these things here, but it wasn't the answer I was looking for. You're right. Miss Hendrickson.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the ribs. They need to expand and
Well, that's kind of what Miss Clayton said,
move,
huh? Breathing.
but then
Yeah.
also the ribs offer support there. So is it like they're not really needed as much?
That's where I was headed. Yes. My rib cage in front, don't forget, is attached to my thoracic vertebrae and back, and it supports them. My thoracic vertebrae are on their own, but my cervical vertebrae and my lumbar vertebrae are all on their own. There's nothing in front. I know there's muscles in front, but there's no bones in front to support them. they're all on their own and they need actually extra help. That's the idea. Yeah. So that's, and I point that out more, by the way, guys. I don't actually know that's true. I mean, that's a very good working theory, but I also point it out just to help you remember where they are and where they aren't. They're in the cervical region and the lumbar region because those areas don't have any extra bones to support them. Your thoracic region has ribs coming out all the way around and meeting in front to support them. So these two areas are kind of bobbly, wobbly areas, and they need all the extra stuff they can get. And so they have intertransverse sari, which means muscles between the transverse processes, right? And you have interspinalis muscles, which are essentially in the cervical and lumbar region too, which are between the spinous processes. Intertransverse sari are between the transverse processes. Interspinalis are between the spinous processes. The reason you will probably never feel these is because there's actually a ligament that runs over all your spinous processes and your transverse processes. So you can, feel free, by the way, on somebody who's open to it, you can kind of wiggle your fingers between the spinous processes and feel something there, but it's very hard to tell. And you are affecting the interspinalis, but it's very hard to tell that because there's all these ligaments in there as well. But the point is, these are the deepest layer, and they help tie your vertebrae together again. And of course, they tie the cervical and the lumbar together. Essentially, it's just your cervical and lumbar. You don't have to remember the exact areas as long as you remember cervical and lumbar, because those areas need lots and lots of support. Miss Avalos, please.
I read something somewhere that says that they're important for like proprioception than for actual movement. So more of the nervous system with the movement. Is that?
Oh, Miss Avalos, I've never heard that before, but it's actually really brilliant, if I understand you correctly. It's probably brilliant even if I don't understand you correctly, but it's brilliant because you have proprioceptors in your muscles that sense stretch and tension. And I could see the value of your body knowing how much tension is in your low back and in your neck so it can make adjustments with other muscles. So it's actually a very brilliant idea you've got there that, we always think about muscles as movement, movement, movement. But as we know from looking at your bones and every other place in your body, things don't just do one thing. And you're absolutely right. They might be there to sense movement, which would still go along with my other theory, right? Because the thoracic area does not have as much movement because the rib cage stops it. So these are areas of movement, and it's very important your body know exactly how much stuff is moving with these vertebrae because they're very critical. And then it could provide support and tension from other muscles based on this. I really like this idea. I'm stealing it, Ms. Avalos.
Tension.
Yeah, as with many of your ideas. That's really interesting. I love that. So she's saying they're in there, not so much because they're power, because they're tiny, but they're in there because your body can then sense what's going on with sensors that we are going to study tomorrow, by the way, that exist inside these muscles. Miss Carrillo, please.
I am derailing a little bit.
Nope.
I can't find it, but what the intraversari, what does the sari part mean?
It means that they want to apologize. It is the plural of intertransverse. Intertransverse I or something. They're trying to make it plural in Latin, and that's where the sari comes from. But it just means intertransverse process. But once you get a whole bunch of intertransverse processes, they call them intertransverse sari. It's just the way they make it plural in Latin, as far as I know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good questions. I missed your word-based questions on my days off.
You were on top of it today. You were like, this is what this word means. This is what this word means. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm just writing them left and right then.
Good. Yeah, so trying to be, I had 5 days to kind of, try to get my game going. Get ready for you. Okay, and that, by the way, everybody, I think that's it. And that's enough, by the way. That's a ridiculous amount of muscles. Part of the reason we share them all is because they all fit so well together. So you can think of these as all movements of your spine, right? These are muscles that move your spine. We learned about the big easy ones, the erector spinae group, the spinalis, longissimus, iliocostalis, But then we learned about much more complex ones that are deeper. We learned about the multifidi and the rotatories. And then we learned about three main neck muscles, the semispinalis capitis, the splenius capitis, and the splenius cervicis, that all kind of move your neck around, and thus your head. And then we learned about some super deep muscles called the interprocessus muscles, the intertransversari and the interspinalis muscles that sew together the processes, the spinous processes and the transverse processes in your lumbar and cervical region. I said because those areas need more support. Miss Avalos added a much more intriguing idea to that, saying that maybe your body also needs to sense those areas very acutely and very precisely, and therefore those muscles are in there more because your body can be like, hey, they're being stressed and stretched, and therefore it can know that we've got to start increasing power to your erector spinae muscles in that area, or we're going to have a ruptured disc or something. So I don't even know what to say. I think it's a brilliant idea. And easily, by the way, both those theories could be true. And I'm not just trying to save myself here. They both could be true because they could provide both. But I think she makes a really good point. Any questions about that? I've released homework, which is 3 things. One is a video on the multifidi and rotatories. The other one is a test, 15-point test, which probably means just 15 questions. And the last one is matching on Massage Therapy Textbook, Chapter 23, the nervous system, because we will be doing the nervous system tomorrow. So